Challenging the status quo, Justin went on to become a professional saxophone player and was featured in the 2002 film Drumline. At the age of 17, he was accepted to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Prescott, Arizona, pursued a Bachelor's of Science degree in Aeronautical Science, transferring in 2005 to Oklahoma State University, completing his degree in 2008. Arriving in Stillwater, Justin hit the ground running, becoming an elected Student Government Association senator, and obtained chairmanship of the Student Commission Alliance Committee by the end of first term. Continuing to defy those around him, Justin ran and was overwhelmingly elected to the office of Student Body Senate Chairman in 2007. Biassou is a member of the St. John's Catholic Church and a former reading and mathematics tutor at Westwood Elementary School. Please join me in welcoming Justin Biassou.
Please join me in welcoming Justin Biassou.
Good morning, everyone. I am Justin Biassou, as you've just heard, and I want to start out with a question. I had a chance to meet a few of you this morning, and so I want to know, do you or do any of you believe that someone of 18 years or 17 years or 15 years old can change the community around them? Yes. I'm seeing some nods. I'm also seeing a couple of people eating some more pizza. That's understandable. Now, changing the world around them without being the next Mother Teresa, the next Joan of Arc, or the next contestant to get kicked off of Flavor of Love 2. This is what I believe I can speak to all of you about how I will be able to change the community around me as someone of young age, and how I hope that you can take from this message today ways that you can begin to do that too. And one of the first ways is by really changing the world around you. And I found that came from 4 steps. And I want you to repeat these steps with me. Of course, if you're chewing pizza, I don't want you to choke, so take your time. The first one, it's speaking up. Say it with me. Speak up. Speak up. You've got to speak up if you hope to be a young leader. And all of you, I can see, are up-and-coming leaders because you chose to spend your lunchtime with me instead of with your friends. So, the second thing, being willing to admit your mistakes. Admitting your mistakes. Sounds good. We're getting better. Always being willing to say, why not? Say, why not? Why not? And never letting an opportunity to lead pass you by. You don't have to repeat it. But really never letting an opportunity pass you by to lead is really what makes someone like myself really a strong leader at this age, rather than someone that's 20 or 30 years, 20 or 30 years older than I am. That's what makes this whole point important. So the first portion that I'd like to discuss is speaking up. Now, really, if you do wish to lead others, you've got to be able to listen to others, and you've also got to be able to state your own opinion. The first opportunity that I had to really be that person to where I learned that speaking up would be a great asset to making me the next leader that I am today started back in actually 2000. For those of you who are probably not old enough, there was an election going on. One of the most closely contested elections going down to just one state. Does anyone actually know what that state was? Florida. Florida. Okay, this is good to know. I wanted to make sure I wasn't dating myself. Florida, one of the closest contested elections. Now at this time, you had many people on both sides of the aisle. One side saying that we should continue to count the votes, the other side saying that we should end it all and just let things be. Now, no matter what side you stood on, the reason why I mentioned this was because at the time, a lot of people were just hearing what their parents were telling them. They weren't taking time to listen and find out what was actually going on. So what I chose to do in 9th grade was actually begin to research. I know I was a bit of a political nerd back then, but I know that it was something that came to be quite an asset to me because it showed that whenever there was things going on within our communities, within the world, within the country, I actually took the time to learn about it, to research it, to listen and find out what was going on. And really, after researching it, I really did find that it was really probably one of the most complex and complicated elections that we've dealt with in a long time. So I began to speak up. I began to say to my friends, look, this election is something that everyone needs to understand. It's a very complicated issue, and no matter what side that you're on, you have to let the American people work through this. The Supreme Court decided it, and we've seen exactly what's happened with that. But I mention all of this, I tell you this story of how I spoke up, because as a ninth grader, I began to start finding that there were other people around me that agreed with me, that there needed to be research done, that finding out information about the world going on around them is what makes true leaders. JFK tells us something, and I really want you to really take this to heart. He says that leadership and learning are indispensable to one another. Leadership and learning. If you hope to be a leader one of these days, especially in the age that you are, and I can tell you, I see leaders in this room right here today. You have to begin to start to learn about the world around you, and not continue to just listen to majority's opinion, and actually take the time to find out what your own opinion is. So, fast forward to 2005, I entered Oklahoma State University. I didn't know a soul here. I'd never been to Oklahoma before in my life. And the time that I came into a campus was the moment that I chose to actually come to Oklahoma State University. And I knew that I wanted to continue to have a voice on this campus. I knew that I wanted to continue to have an effect on the student body. And so what I did was I sought an office within the student government. There was a vacancy for one semester. And I was appointed to fill that seat for that one semester. And I knew that I had to run for election for it, but I was so passionate about getting a chance to just really get in there and really make an effect on the student body that I chose to get involved in the student government. And that's really where I found my voice. And believe me, in the next few minutes we have a chance to talk. You'll hear about some of the experiences and stories of how I began to find my voice within the student government. I think that I would say that the most important time where speaking up really made a difference came in the following spring. That following spring, after I was appointed, tuition was on an increase at Oklahoma State University. And the cost of living was on the rise, as well as many of you know. It was absolutely vital because students were dropping out at a higher rate than before. And it was time for the student government to act. But you had a lot of people on both sides that just chose to not really do anything. They didn't want to change anything around them. They didn't want to have an effect on this. They didn't really want to speak up and do an accountable. So I said that enough was enough, and I chose to act. I teamed up with a senator by the name of Andrew Hawkins. And Andrew Hawkins and I, we decided that we wanted to institute a cap on yearly increases in tuition. Now this sounded like a bold plan. And I know that this was something that was going to be very difficult if we were going to hopefully get something done. We need to talk with everyone, bring people together to get this achieved. We received pretty much a firestorm from everyone around us that didn't want us to make this an issue. Realizing that the student body was hurting, we said that we were not going to allow for this to continue. We were not going to allow for students to continue to fall by the wayside at Oklahoma State. And so, as the people that wanted us to remain quiet sat there, we became more vocal. We went as far as to go meet with our state legislators and told them what we thought. We told them that we believed that a necessary cap on tuition increases were necessary as it was in the years before. After we got it passed by the student government Senate, after we actually did get it passed by the Senate, it was a slim margin. It was vetoed by the president of the student body. Pretty much, for those of you that have already gone through civics, understand that if a bill is vetoed, it can pretty much be brought back to the Senate to be passed overwhelmingly, or it dies. So, what we chose to do is not really letting ourselves get completely overwhelmed with despair, knowing that the student body needed our help. We chose to go through with an override. And that night, I tell you, I gave the message to the senators that it was time to stand up. It was time to stand up, and it was time to make a difference to the students that needed them, and not sit on the sidelines. It was speaking up that night that got that piece of legislation passed by one of the largest margins of veto override in Senate history. That's what this whole thing is all about. That's why I'm standing here before you today. If you don't take anything else from what I'm saying today, it's that when you're young, when you're here, when you have the opportunity to affect the people around you, either in high school or college, you have to begin to speak up. You have to begin to let your voice be heard here and now, because I can tell you, in 10 and 15 and 20 years, you will be the most strong, one of the strongest leaders than you could possibly imagine. So, we were able to get that piece of legislation passed. It went overwhelmingly, and since that time, we've been beginning to start seeing Board of Regents and the state legislature take on this issue of tuition cap. And with the recent economy and with the recent drop-off in students, we begin to start seeing that that's going to be instituted. So, I really do find that those that don't stand up for what they believe in are really just going to be left to follow the masses. So the question is, do you want to be a leader? I'm not hearing anything. Do you want to be a leader?
Yes.
Okay. Then what do you have to do?
Speak up.
There we go. You're starting to get it. I like that. We got more coming, but speak up is the first one. Speak up is the first one. So, now, after learning to speak up, I learned how to deal with mistakes. And the reason why I bring up all of these points about my life and the journey that I took was because you're going to find as a young leader, it's going to be the hardest thing to admit your mistakes to those around you, your peers, the people that look up to you or you work with. Fearing ridicule or feeling as if you are not worthy of being in that leadership position. You've got to be able to admit your mistake and move on. And I tell you, that's one of the largest problems that we face. And I want to tell you a lesson about how I learned that. Back when I was elected, shortly after the passage of that tuition legislation, I was elected to student body senate chair. And so, well, I tell you, ignoring the situation and not admitting your fault really does not make a situation better. We got into a fight with the press as the student body senate chair and the student senate on the posting of an agenda and whether or not it violated an Open Meetings Act. Now, it sounds so minuscule and it sounds so small, but a small issue was only made worse when we chose not to, and I didn't at the time believe that we were in the wrong. We fought it, we challenged it. We believed that we had been in the correct side of the argument. And so, we continued to believe that we were in the right, we didn't bring anyone together. That's when the editorials started rolling in. That's when the questions and articles of questioning the Senate, questioning my leadership, began to start being a major issue. That's when it became a major issue. And so, if you don't realize that admitting a mistake from the beginning, even whether or not you don't even really do think that you're in the wrong, getting people together, finding out whether or not you think, well, finding out really what they think, and see whether or not you can come to an agreement on things. And if you made a mistake, admitting it and moving on quickly. I can tell you the biggest problem that I had from that moment on was really being able to regain the trust of the press. Now, of course, government and the press never quite get along. But you find that there's always a time that you all can get together and really get things done if you really are passionate about it. They were a big ally on a piece of legislation for the tuition legislation a few years back. So, admitting a mistake and moving on quickly from it, I tell you, it's one of the hardest things to do as a young leader. But I know that if you take it to heart and realize that someone else that's going to be leading is not going to be right every single time. You're not going to be right every single time. But being able to move on and admit the mistake is what's just key. Now, a good leader is going to be tested. And whether or not they're secure enough to actually accept that they've been in the wrong and move on is a test of a true leader. Most leaders aren't always perfect. All leaders are not perfect. But if you hope to really stand up and be a person that can change the world around them and affect the world around them, you've got to be able to admit your fault. So far we've discussed speaking up, how to admit fault. And so now I'd like to talk about the opportunity to become a leader. And that's by simply asking the question, why not? So as we got to the third one, why not? Why not? There we go. Why not? Exactly. Just ask yourself that. Just walk around the hallway. Just start talking to yourself and say that. The reason why I say that is, why not? Hey, I've done it. Just say it. Why not? The reason why I ask myself why not And it comes in many opportunities. For example, June of last year was the first time the idea of running for a political office ever came to my mind. The first time. I was sitting at lunch with a few city officials, and they mentioned that there'd be an opening in the city council that following March. Now sitting there, I really did begin to start seeing the puzzle pieces come together about how I could possibly get in and how I could possibly do it. But again, I wasn't at the point in my own belief that I could do it. Whether or not I'd be ready, whether or not I could actually make a difference if I were to run it, if I were actually elected. And so I began to ask my friends and family. And they told me, well, Justin, is this something that you really want to do? Is Stillwater a place that you've come to love? And I said yes. I said yes with all of my heart and soul. And the reason why was because from the moment I got here, Stillwater had just wrapped its arms around me and accepted me as if I were part of the family. And I tell you, nowhere else in this great country have I ever been so warmly received. And I just really want to say thank you to Stillwater in the middle of my message today. Thank you. So pretty much the experience that I brought to the table as the liaison to the city of Stillwater. I was the committee chair of the liaison to the city of Stillwater. One of the great things we had to do when I was committee chair was I took my committee, we got in the car and we went up to Lawrence, Kansas. We were doing an in-depth study on how we can make downtown Stillwater like downtown Lawrence, Kansas. How many of you all have been to downtown Lawrence, Kansas? So you guys know what I'm talking about, for the few of you that have been there. There's something magical about that downtown. It's like Disney World and everything in New York City wrapped up all together. But it can be done on a small town level. So that was our plan. We went out to Lawrence, Kansas. We met with the mayor. We asked them, what are some of the things that we can do? We came back with an in-depth study on what is it that downtown Stillwater is missing that Lawrence, Kansas really does have. One is a Ben & Jerry's, another is a Gap, and a few other things. But that's not important. So we made it all the way back, and we presented that legislation to the city of Stillwater, the city council, in their full meeting, and told them why we believed that Stillwater can be Lawrence, Kansas, or a model of that. And so that was the experience that I brought to the table. This was not just some pipe dream of someone that had never had a really experience of working with the city or knowing the city mattered. Just choosing to just jump in and say, well, we'll see what happens, and just kind of close my eyes and just move forward. No, I really did have the question of how and was I ready? But in that November of that year, last year, everything did change. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, a good friend of mine, Andrew Hawkins, he passed away unexpectedly. He was one of my closest friends and confidants. And Andrew was one of the few people that I felt would really help me along in this campaign if I were to truly do it. He passed away at the young age of 25. And it was one of the hardest things that going through the process of whether or not I was going to get involved, whether or not I was going to run for Stillwater City Council. It really did take a toll on me. So I took the time over that holiday season. Okay. I took the time over the holiday season to think. I took the time to really go into seclusion and begin to start pondering whether or not it was really my time and whether or not I really did have the strength to get through it, an entire campaign. And so it was a long time coming. I spent the entire Christmas going home, talking to my parents, asking them whether or not I thought that they thought that I should run, whether or not they believed that I should run. Talk to my friends I haven't seen from high school in a while. And so the question that I finally came to, and the question that I really want to impart to you, the question that just really hit me like none other, was would I want to look back 10 years from now and ask myself, what if I had chosen to run? What if I would have won? What if, even if I didn't win, I would have found, a wealth of possibilities that would have been available to me? And I knew that I did not want to say to myself 10 years from now, Justin, it would have been that hard if you did that. I not only kick myself and say that I chose not to make that change possible and really just step in and do it when I really thought that I could. So, I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to run. And I'm so glad that I did, because I know that I wouldn't be standing here before you today if I didn't choose to ask that question one day. You know, returning from Christmas, I announced and I said that I was in it, and that I was not only in it, but I was in it to win it. A lot of people just choose to get into these races and just say, I'm going to make a statement. But I was in it, and I was in this race to win it. At the time, I started with no supporters, no sleep, and no money. And I pretty much ended the campaign with no supporters, no money, and even less sleep. But that's not important. So pretty much the campaign was underway. Shortly after I announced, let's just say 2 senior members of the Stillwater community chose to get in as well. And that's when things got interesting. We had 3 big hurdles that we had to overcome. 3 huge hurdles. We had to get people registered to vote at their homes that were the college students. We had to get our name out there. I'm sure until probably about today, unless you guys saw some of the campaign material, you guys never heard of who Justin Biassou was. Probably thought I was some sort of band or something like that. Look, so we had to get, that was a huge point we had to get out. We had to make sure that people understood what our message was. And then we had to overcome the negative view of my youth. Now, you know, this town has a lot of senior members and a lot of youthful members in this town. But those people that pretty much have the ability to really make a difference in the community are the senior members that actually vote. So we had to go out there and convince them that my youth was not a crutch. It was actually an asset. So what we did was we commenced a weekly registration drive. We had 4 weeks to do it. We registered over 1,000 people on just being at Kyle Clock every single day for 4 weeks straight. Registering people that had never been into the political process before because they were excited about it. We pretty much went to everything that we were invited to. Everything we were invited to. I went and knocked on every single door in downtown Stillwater, the businesses, and told them about some of the work that I did, working and fighting for. We went ahead and went to churches, spoke at churches on Sunday, and told them about my message. And I didn't spend a lot of time telling them what I was going to do for them. But I spent a lot of time asking them, what can I do for them? That's another point in leadership. Listening to others and finding out what is it that you can do for them is what makes a true leader possible. You can do tons of things, but if you're not actually appealing to the people that are around you, then you're wasting your time. And finally, on television. We actually put up a few television and radio ads. If you ever have a chance and ever bored, you can go ahead and start looking at the, go to YouTube and just put in my name in captions, and I'm sure you'll get a good cross-section of the ads that we're able to put up. I can tell you this right here now, we had fun doing it. We gave speeches every single day. I mean, pretty much by the end of the campaign, I had no voice, but I was glad because I was excited about the candidacy. We knocked on doors, went to houses, I'm pretty sure I visited my parents' house. I was everywhere in this town. People knew who I was coming to election. And the negative view of my youth, that was a huge point that we had to get over. And so spending some time and really thinking about it, I was thinking about it, and there was a verse that was handed to me. And it was a Bible verse. And it said, and I want you to really take this to heart. It said, let no one have contempt for your youth, but set it as an example for those who believe in speech, conduct, and purity. That's what this is all about. That's what this whole thing is all about. Being able to make sure that you use your youth as an asset, not a crutch. Not something that holds you back. After I delivered that line, that pretty much shut down any question of whether or not I would be able and ready to lead. So, pretty much the next day I received endorsements from everyone and anyone. Downtown business owners, to school superintendents, not this school superintendent, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, state and local leaders, and everyone around me, because they believed that my candidacy was legitimate after seeing me at the debate on television and really reading about it in the papers. We had people so excited about my campaign. My aunt flew in from Florida, my other aunt flew in from New Jersey, my mom flew in from Georgia, and they were just so excited to help out on those last couple of days of the campaign, holding up signs. And I'm not sure if you got a chance to see some of the signs, or did anyone see some of the signs of people waving during that March election? Anyone remember that? Yes, someone, another person. I can tell you, I will tell my mom thanks because she was so gracious to come all the way out here. So, we made it all the way to the election night party, and with pretty much everything, the last speech given, the last champagne bottle uncorked, we came about 300 votes shy of really making a difference and actually breaking into the run. You know, this is actually one of the closest someone my age has ever come to winning an election of that sort. And I brought in hundreds of new voters of people that had never been involved within politics before. People that I never met before coming up to me and saying that they voted for me. It meant so much. And I really did appreciate it. And it was all willing, it was all due to the fact that I said, why not? And since that time, as you heard, I've been appointed to the airport authority by the mayor and the city council. So gracious enough to keep me on board, and it's just been an incredible experience. So, you've heard some of the ways to be a leader. Finally, I'll discuss how to attain a leadership role. Now, it's as simple as never letting an opportunity pass you by. Now, an opportunity passing by starts with volunteering in organizations. There's organizations all around you. There's Beta Club and you know, NHS, and all of these organizations right now. Volunteer from the bottom up. Start there. Don't feel that you start as president and continue to work your way in. It's where it all begins. You'll find that you begin to appreciate people that are willing to work from the bottom up. Now, when you're chosen to lead, you'll see an audit first. You're going to find people asking you questions, asking you, what should you do there? What should you do? Should you not do this? And you making the call. It's going to feel odd at first because you're not used to being in that command structure. But I can promise you, you'll get used to it. You'll get used to it. You know, you'll be forced to make the tough decisions, and really people will start to be looking to you for guidance. People are going to start asking you, what's your opinion? Why do you think that that's possible? And you'll begin to get used to it. I know that coming in the Senate chair was something that I began to get used to. And it motivated me because I was able to learn how to, I was really able to learn how to make a tough decision and stick with it. You won't be right every time, as I said before. But being willing to admit it and move on is what really makes a difference. So that's what this whole leadership's all about. This whole leadership thing. It's about being able to speak up, being able to admit your mistakes and move on, always being willing to say, why not, and never letting a leadership opportunity pass you by. So you have to realize that, guys, this is our time. Young leaders are involved like never before. And, you know, this is our time to stand up. If this is not, if this is something that you're interested in, I tell you, if you stand with me, and if you stand with the leaders around you, believe me, we can make a difference. The question is, are you up to it?
Yeah.
You're up to it? All right, let's get started. Thank you very much.